Okay, welcome to the Learning Design Masterminds podcast that bridges the worlds of instructional design and today in artificial intelligence. I am Sherry Conklin, your host, and I'm thrilled to be your guide as we explore the exciting intersection of these two dynamic fields. So with me today, we have Nikki Strawn, who is an MIT alumnus. And so, Nikki, you have been working in various sectors in the instructional design world, from K-12, higher ed, corporate, public higher ed university, private university. AI has been at the forefront of the news in instructional technology. So can you tell us how you have started incorporating AI into your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And my response to that is I incorporate into everything. I use it all the time. I am, thrilled about the power of the technology, but also being mindful of the power of the technology. So, and we'll dive into some of those ethical issues later. But how I use it currently, I always tell everybody it feels like the personal assistant that I never had the money to afford. Like it is, it is, if I'm ever stumped, I'm always, you would see in the movies where you would call your personal assistant to ask them to do X, Y, and Z for you, or now it's just pulling up ChatGPT or Bard. I use Bard a lot too. And asking away in there and getting, helping me brainstorm, helping me figure out frameworks for certain documents, and so on and so forth. So in instructional design specifically, how I'm using it, I use it to help me create instructional goals and learning objectives. So I'll tell it a little bit about the program. I'll give it all the background, and it helps you as well. Think about and put together all of the analysis that you kind of have floating around in your head. So I'll pull up ChatGPT and put in some of my analysis information about it. And I'll tell ChatGPT, like, you're an instructional designer for XYZ organization with the following mission. And you've been asked to design a training program that, blah, 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 blah. And I put in all the analysis information I have and any parameters that I know, and I just hit enter, and it'll just spit out some idea, some framework, some, just something that I can then start working with and start making my own. Very rarely do I find that I'm completely copying and pasting. There's a lot that you have to change. You'll start figuring out how to tell it different things so that it's giving you a different output, so that you can manipulate it to produce for your clients exactly what they're looking for, because it's limited. It only knows what you're telling it, and so more about your clients and more about what they're looking for. So you're always going to have to edit it a bit. The one thing I do like about Bard a little bit better than ChatGPT, which, by the way, I only use the free versions of all of these because I'm poor, and so because it's just I have not had the need yet to pay for the full version. So this is all with the free version. But with Bard in the free version, that Bard is the Google AI, kind of the competitor to ChatGPT. Which ChatGPT is more on the Microsoft side, or is heavily invested in with Microsoft. So Bard is Google's version of that. And what I like about the Bard version is it'll give you 3 different drafts of answers of what you ask. So if using my previous example there, if I asked it to develop a training program with the following objectives, knowing these following parameters, Bard will give me 3 different versions of that I can kind of look through and see the differences between those versions and pick and choose from those what I like. But yeah, I've used it to help, as I said, with instructional objectives, learning objectives, syllabus, help with project management documents, like scope documents, change management documents. I've even done workload estimators with it, just all kinds of stuff that typically take a lot of brain power for you to even just initiate. I find that using ChatGPT to get that initiation going is just, it takes a lot of that mental load lift off of you. So then it gives you this nice template to start from, and then you can just start putting in the details that you know need to be there.
So would you say having a thorough like learner analysis and even contextual analysis, like, where this would happen, would produce in more of, I guess, instead of saying, the optimal output, but a great brainstorming session with, it's almost like having another instructional, like you said, personal assistant, you're having a brainstorming. So would you say those are really important to do upfront?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Having, and you can use these tools to help you analyze and get some analysis insight. But I have found that the more analysis you're bringing to ChatGPT, the better the output is of what you're looking for. I've seen newbies who are using AI for the first time. They'll go in and they'll just ask it a question like they would ask Google, and they get a very limited answer. And they do get an answer that typically they're impressed with. Like, oh, this is impressive. But I'm like, hey, start off before you ask that question. Start off by telling it these things, telling it the name of the organization that you're working for. Tell it the mission of the department for which you're working for. Tell it the stakeholders for which this is going to impact. Tell it those things, and then ask that question and see the difference that you get. And it's amazing because it will take that information and think like an instructional designer with that. And I'm always a big fan of telling the AI whether I'm wanting something that's student facing or whether I'm wanting something that's internal instructional design team facing. And the difference in the outputs in that is amazing as well. So if I asked ChatGPT, write an assignment for or write a course plan for an 8-week course for instructional design team in the following topics, program, or whatever, giving these learning objectives. It'll produce out something that I can bring back to my team and say, hey, here's some ideas that we can start with. What do you guys think? Versus if I ask it, write an 8-week student-facing course design plan for this, all of a sudden the language changes. The way it's now presenting those things is very student-facing, and you're using a lot of the language that they tell you as an instructional designer to make sure you're changing your language when you're producing a student-facing product versus an internal product. So how it knows to do that is amazing. And of course, sometimes you'll have to play around with the tone. I find that sometimes the tone of AI is a little more chipper than like I feel like it maybe needs to be. Like they're always like, it's like, razzle dazzle, just a little more, I don't know. So sometimes I have to play around with the tone a little bit. I have to tell it a little bit more about the tone I'm looking for. Like keep it student facing, but make it a little more serious and professional tone. And instead, because sometimes it'll want to give you that kind of like the Magic School Bus, Miss Frizzle, like that's kind of the vibe it's giving me sometimes. And I'm like, this needs to be toned down a little bit. So you will have to tell the AI what kind of tone you're looking for according to the audience.
Yes. Yeah, so I think you touched on the prompt engineering. So like we were designing a course for it, and for a course from scratch. So we were like, come up with these learning objectives, but we realized we had to do the persona. So from a faculty's standpoint in instructional technology, write these learning objectives for the course. But then we realized, because it used understand and learners will know, and we're like, so using Bloom's taxonomy verbs, write, and then the parameters like you talked about, 3 to 5 goals. Otherwise it spits out like 20 sometimes.
Yes. And yet I know prompt engineering was one of the questions you wanted to ask, and we've been talking about it right now. And my advice too is, especially if you're using AI, go to any prompt engineering trainings that you can, or webinars or whatever. I always pick up something new that I didn't know. I was like, oh, I didn't know you could tell it that, or I hadn't thought about it in that way. I was like, I never knew that. Like using Bloom's taxonomy, that's a great idea. Tell it to use Bloom's taxonomy to design the learning objectives. And yes, and so the more and just having conversations like this with colleagues who use it and ask it, well, how do you get it to produce X, Y, and Z, or what do you find that you have to tell it? You get so many ideas of how to get it to do what it is you need it to do.
Yeah, I found with developing case studies is very difficult.
Yes.
It says what we found for this course was you don't say develop a case study because it actually takes a case and then analyzes it. So you have to say a case study prompt for graduate students in an instructional technology class. It is the name of the course. And then we got a really good prompt that we were able to then manipulate. But
Yes.
again, it's none of anything it's produced always has to have human revision.
Yes, for sure. 100%. I'm never just straight copying and pasting from ChatGPT. I mean, you're always editing what the output is. But yes, and that's a great example with a case study, because if you put in, it's going to, it responds to everything that you write in there as if it's an action for it to do that action. So if you're writing in a case study, it's going to read the case study and analyze it and do the case study unless you tell it. And there's a lot about using the parentheses too, or the quotation marks, like that. That's very helpful. So if you don't want it to act on the text that you're putting in, you want it to just use that text as an inference, you're putting it in double parentheses. So you're saying like, use the following case study to create questions for doctoral level students in an EDD program to answer. And then you have to put in the case study in double parentheses. So, or double quotation, sorry. So then it just reads the case study, but then it answers your question of developing questions about that instead of analyzing the case study for you. And there's just like small tricks like that I learned by going to some of these prompt engineering webinars and trainings, or just talking with other people about how they're using, ChatGPT. And I've used it to create case studies too, and that's difficult. I don't know if you've ever had it create a case study for you. That you can get it to create a beautiful case study, but you have to work with it a lot. You have to, and you're using chunks of what it's giving you and asking it, okay, expand on this, or don't give them this. And, you have to kind of manipulate it in that way.
Yes. What different sectors? And when I say sectors, I mean like multimedia development. You've mentioned project management, change management. I know we're talking a lot about the pedagogy part, but what other areas of instructional design have you been incorporating this in?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. I think the biggest part of incorporating it in right now, and it might just be due to my job because I'm acting more as a project manager right now, is a lot of project management. I'm using it to do a lot of project management documents. But I have also used it to design course plans for 8 to 16 week courses. I've used it to design individual assignments based on a course level objective. Also, I've used it to create case studies for sales training in a corporate environment in a particular organization. I've used it to create a rubric for evaluating numerous types of assignments. I've created also, not even just in higher ed, but in corporate, I've had to do a sales leadership evaluation tool, which is a rubric essentially. And so I had it help me create an evaluation tool that could be used to evaluate the leadership skills of sales managers in XYZ market. You give it the details of what it needs. And then a lot of the creative stuff, especially when I'm looking at some of my corporate clients, they're often wanting like storytelling embedded within the trainings to make them a little more personal, relevant, and just entertaining. So using it to help develop a story based on the objective. So I tell it exactly that, like you need to use storytelling. You're an instructional designer. You're designing a sales training program for XYZ topic. Your learning objectives are XYZ. However, you want the sales training to be heavily influenced by storytelling and using storytelling strategies. Give me examples of, how this training could unfold or whatever. I don't know exactly what you're doing. And then it'll just spit out some sort of like story for you that you can kind of run with and start saying that it'll give you an idea. And then obviously some of it is just like, yeah, that's not going to work. But it always gives me an idea that I can run with. I'm like, yes, that is what I'm looking for. That'll work, and I can take it from there.
And you have to know some of the jargon to be able to get it to give you at least a place to go start running with.
Yes, for sure.
We've been doing course design. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
We've been doing the course design in the sense of making responsive pages within Canvas. So we'll tell it what we want, and what we're getting is the HTML code to put in, and makes these responsive ADA compliant pages that are aesthetically appealing. But I have to work with someone who knows the jargon of being able to put the CSS inside the HTML, because yes.
Yes. I have yet to use it, and I've seen a lot of developers using it in that way that are getting it to spit out code. And I think it's just because right now in my position I'm not responsible for that, and so but yes, I could see in past positions when I had more I had to do some of that development, that website development using some of those languages, how beneficial that can be. And I've seen examples of what it can spit out, but I've also seen how you have to have someone who knows how those languages are talking to each other, because there sometimes will be things that aren't exactly right, or it's not in the platform that you're using, it's not exactly right as well. I've yet to use it other than just for personal fun. I have yet to use it with like images and videos. Yeah, I mean, I've done some like, just personal, like, make my French bulldog look like he's surfing, or something like that. But I have not done it for anything yet for any of my clients, like image wise or video wise. But I've seen some pretty cool examples of how people are using it in those fields to produce, instructional and training images.
Yes, and I have a colleague who has really been using it, but also there was like the big news the other day of images that had come out using AI, which were very inappropriate, which leads me into my final question of, there's a lot of ethical considerations to take, like, when are we plagiarizing, or are we using this for good, or, what have you seen and would consider some things that we need to think about?
Yeah, for sure. So to begin, I'm always transparent about my use of using AI, whether it's with my team internally or whether it's with a client, an external client. I'm always making sure they're aware that I'm using it and in what way I'm using it, because there's some And you should always check to see if the organization you're working for has an AI use policy. Those are becoming way more frequent now, where they're telling you the certain things that you can and cannot put into the AI. This is especially on the corporate side of things. Things like their sales strategy, their marketing strategy. They're not going to want that be put in AI. So you have to and just start branding stuff. Typically if you're signing a non-disclosure in order to work for that organization, there's probably going to be an AI policy of what you can and cannot put into that AI. So you have to be aware of those things. And then just if you're ever submitting work for publication, I think it's important to acknowledge that you have used AI with that work as well. And there's ways that you can now cite it, where you can cite it with you and using AI, so that you're aware of that. Because as I said, I do think it's a very powerful tool. I think it's a transformative tool, and I think it's going to make work extremely more efficient. But I also think there are some dangers to it. And I don't know if dangers are the right word to use, but you have to be aware of especially some of these societal impacts that are coming from it, copyright being one of them, and being able to have integrity about the work that we're producing, I think is very important. So following those copyright and academic integrity rules with it are very important, I believe. Let's see I never put in any personal identifying information into it. So if you're talking about like doing a learner analysis, for example, never putting in like student names or even organization names. I always make up an organization name so that I am careful not to put in any kind of identifying information to protect learners and protect stakeholders and to protect, your clients with that. Obviously, being aware that it can have nefarious uses. People can use it for bad, so you have to be vigilant about that. And then you also have to, keep an eye out on that. And I think it's important that, there's a lot of talk about regulating it. I think there will be regulations at some point, but then it also starts with the individual user. You need to self-regulate, and you also need to regulate when you see it's being misused. You need to report that, and you need to hold each other accountable for the ways in which it could be misused.
As a faculty in an instructional technology program, students are going to want to use this. And then, when they do create, let's say, their portfolios as they're going out to get a job, I think it would be important for them if they did use AI to collaborate on any assignments. I mean, we have our students work in teams, and we say, explain your role in this team. So I think it would be the same, correct? Like, I collaborated with ChatGPT or Bard on this project, and here was maybe say their role in the project, and then I did everything else. Or
Absolutely. And there's a lot of in the higher ed world, there is a ton of AI policies that are out there now as examples that you can look at that to put in syllabus. I think Indiana University has a really great example of one, and it'll change depending on each course. So, some courses don't want you to use it at all, or some instructors don't want you to use it at all. Some see the value of it as a learning tool, because it really is a learning tool. If you start to use it, you're going to start to see how it is a learning tool. And the ability to copy and paste your transcript with ChatGPT is a great way to hold students accountable for their use of it. So I've seen that a lot, where instructors will require them to use ChatGPT on a particular assignment, and then ask them to include the link to their ChatGPT conversation, so that they can see what they're doing with it. And I think that's very wise. I think it's very wise for programs to start having students use it as a learning tool and walk them through the steps of how to use it, but then how to create an end product that is academically sound and has integrity as well. So walking students through that entire process of so you want to start with ChatGPT to brainstorm. That's great. I think that's a wonderful idea. Let's brainstorm. So in week 1, maybe we're using ChatGPT to brainstorm this idea. Okay, now in week 2, let's analyze the output and see where changes need to be made. Where do you see gaps and why? And how do you know that this is wrong? Where in literature is it telling you that this needs to be changed? And then maybe in week 3, what sources are you going to cite from this information? Because you can't just say like, oh, it's just all from ChatGPT. Well, how does ChatGPT know that this is true? Where are they getting their information from? And then ultimately making your own changes to it. Like what changes are you going to make this your work and have, your ownership with it. And there's so many great examples. I went to this one webinar on using ChatGPT to have students think critically and the ways that they're using it as a partner. Especially, this was a low enrollment class. They didn't have a lot of students. It was hard for them to do partner work because it was like a doctoral level class that maybe had 4 students total. And so they were using ChatGPT as kind of like their critical analysis partner and showing the different outputs that they were getting from using AI with that particular project. That normally if you had a larger class, you would buddy up with someone in the class. And the instructor was just talking about the different outputs and how amazing it was, and just the conversations that developed because of that. And he also did an example where he compared where it was 2 live or 2 human partners versus a human partner and an AI partner, and looking at the differences in what was produced from those outputs. And that's really interesting as well.
Wow. Yeah, I think, and Daisy had just recently not coined this term, but had gone to a webinar, and they said, ChatGPT, I haven't used Bard, but I'm going to now that you mentioned it, and wants to answer your question. So if it can't, it comes up with what we call AI hallucinations, and they fill in the blank with misinformation. So I think that's the big thing is, again, like you said, the critical thinking part. And even for faculty or instructional designers using it, I mean, there has to be a fact check, like an SME or someone that does go through, because there's no such thing as a first draft.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing that I think that people are missing with ChatGPT, and it goes back to it being your personal assistant, is it can produce these wonderful products for you and help you with these large initiatives, but it can also just be used in everyday communications with your colleagues. And I'll write my email in ChatGPT and have it edit it for me, and the way that it will word certain things, I'm like, yes, that sounds so much better, and that is getting to the point that I needed. And and I'll use that. And so I think I just wanted to throw that out there, that it can be used just as like an email editor for you, and it'll help you become a better communicator even with your colleagues. And this is extremely important when you're working with like subject matter experts, especially if you're in a sector it's high pace, very fast. You want to make sure that your communication with them is on point. And so sometimes not having to have that mental load of figuring out how's the perfect way to say this. I can just chat into ChatGPT and say, I need to send an email that communicates the following, and I'll bullet point out the following. And I'll say, this is to an external member. I need the tone to be blah, blah, blah. And it'll send out an email, or I'll just write the email in my thoughts that I'm having in my thoughts right into ChatGPT, and I'll put at the top, please rewrite, and it'll rewrite it in some other, format. And I think that as I'm doing that, I'm learning how to be a better communicator, because I'm picking up on the ways it's showing me to say certain things and what phrases to use. And so I feel like it's making my vocabulary better, my word choice better, and it just makes me be a better communicator with my colleagues.
Yeah, because tone is tone is very gray in email, and I feel like sometimes ChatGPT can, or AI can help take the emotion out of the
Yeah.
email to make it more, especially if it's a difficult situation.
Oh, for sure. Yes, I had an instance where I had to kind of hold a colleague accountable for some mishaps, and it was just such an emotionally draining. I was like, oh, I do not want to write this email. I did not, like, because it was just, you're holding someone accountable, but you're also, close with this person, so it hit me. I was like, use ChatGPT. And so I wrote in there, like, I need to write an email addressing the following mishaps. Boom, boom. It said it. So, and like the amount of like emotional labor I would have poured into that was just taken off my plate, because I was now able to use this tool to help me. And yeah, and I've even used it in my personal life when I've gotten a text that I just don't want to answer. I'll be like, give me a response to this, and then I'll just type it in there. So it definitely helps with some of that emotional cognitive load that can come with the interpersonal work that we do.
It does, yes. I think you've made some great points here. And again, I appreciate your time and your willingness to come back and share your experiences with everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
And we will end another session of Learning Design Masterminds.